All police officers be made to carry tasers, or at least asked to. 0207 862 2222. We'd love your thoughts. 5 News has been filming exclusively with West Midlands Police as part of a report you can catch at 4 o'clock today. So they found that although West Midlands Police Federation, an association that represents some officers in the area, wants all of the officers to be given the option of having a taser, the Chief Constable of the force doesn't want that. He says not everyone is suitable for taser training and they would rather spend their funding on recruiting more police. At the moment, about 1 in 5 officers in England and Wales are now taser trained. What do you think, Claudia? Should we give every officer a taser?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the police officers that carry tasers have to go through quite rigorous training to be able to carry a taser. It's not just, an hour's course, it's several days they have to go through, and not everybody passes. It's a bit like firearms training. It's that level of that level of education. And it gives the police, I think, the backup they often need. They don't carry firearms in this country, and they are often faced with situations that are out of control. I know that in rural parts of the country, for example, North Yorkshire, the biggest county in the country, 90% of police officers are single crewed. So they are responding to incidents on their own. So they're going out, they don't know what they're going to be greeted with a lot of the time. I have a friend who's a policewoman. She's now a detective, but she was, when she was, in uniform on the street. She's slightly taller than me. She's 5'4". She was 24 years old, and she responded to a call of a man wielding a machete. Wow. And he was threatening her, and she turned up at the scene. And she said the only time she had to deploy her taser in all the time she was, her career being on the street was in that situation. The guy was huge.
And it worked.
She's a small woman. All she had to do was point it at him, and he immediately dropped the machete. Wow. And that was it. Game over.
What about that, Michael? There's no downside here.
Well, I mean, there clearly is a role for tasers for police officers. It's lucky that police officer had one, your friend there. I think the idea that everyone should carry a taser potentially misunderstands the role of the police in so many situations, because the police, so much of what they're doing isn't going to an incredibly dangerous knife-wielding person. It's sort of knocking on the door of someone who might be in mental distress, knocking on the door of someone who might be suffering domestic violence. And I think there is... the fact that our police are generally unarmed, I think, gives them an interesting challenge, which is how do you police people without constantly threatening serious violence? And I think that is one of the reasons we do have a system of policing by consent, which... I'm also not sure why the timing of this is now, because obviously fear of crime is rising, but actual violent crime has been declining for decades. So the idea that now suddenly we would need to arm our police... Well,
I don't know, but we keep hearing crime is down, and then today there's a story saying about 250,000 crimes haven't been reported, possibly because people don't think they're ever going to be investigated.
Yeah, but the statistics which show crime going down are the ones which aren't based on reporting. So it's the Crime Survey of England and Wales. So the ONS asks 30,000 people every year, have you been a victim of crime? And then by that, they estimate how much crime there's been. And that's what's going down. So it can't be affected by reporting.
Let me show you this, Claudia. This counts against your argument. We're going to see a guy who's 92, Donald Burgess. He's in a care home. He's got no legs, and he's got a butter knife, and he's in a bad mood, and he's sprayed in the face with synthetic pepper spray because he's waving his knife around. He's then... we won't show you this in detail because it's just so upsetting. He's then tasered. All they had to do is leave the room and shut the door and say, calm down, mate.
Also, the officer on the left actually, in a minute, gets out his baton. Yeah. And he could have easily used that to knock the knife out of his hand, the tiny knife. Or, to be honest, he could have just walked over and physically taken it. The guy's obviously old and infirm.
Yeah, and he had one leg.
So I actually had this conversation with my family last night, and my brother sent me this video. And I was horrified. You can't not... If you watch the full video, you can't not be horrified. It's horrendous. It's a massive... completely overuse of force by the police. But I think the police officer that fired the taser honestly should lose their job. It was totally ridiculous. But that you can't take one bad example and say, oh, well, the police can't be trusted with tasers because one person made a very poor decision.
No, fair enough. It's just whether there are police officers... Well, but there are some police officers who shouldn't have tasers because they're criminals themselves, or they've got, whatever. This guy had some sort of God complex or So you can't, if you give it to all of them, you're going to have more cases like that. That's the trouble. Now, that's one of the guys who's been trained, who's tasering a 92-year-old.
It was actually a woman that did it.
In a care. Yeah, sorry, there was a man and a woman there.
Yeah. It was a man who held the baton.
That's right.
And he was the one that did the pepper spray and got the baton out, and then she tasered him. If you watch the video, it's completely mind-blowing. That was a decision that was made at that moment. I cannot understand.
Is that your worry, Michael, that you give it to cops like them?
Yeah, I mean, because the point is, the more tasers you give out, the more they'll be used. Now, it will be the case that a lot of the times when it's used, it will be justified, but the more you give it out, the more situations like that you will get, which seems to me, it seems like we're solving a problem which isn't really there, in a way.
I think the thing with misuse is that they have to go through very rigorous training, and they also wear body cams, and every single time they touch their taser, they have to do a full report of what happened, why it was done, what was the thought process, what were the alternatives, did they have the option to use any other force, could they de-escalate? I mean, most of the time, the purpose of using a taser is to de-escalate.
Yeah. Let's talk to Mark in Cardiff. What do you think? Should more of the police have tasers, Mark?
Well, very interesting. Good morning, panel, anyway, for a start. But I was a police officer for 30 years. I recently retired. And I think what I was hearing from the panel, I think you're looking at the standard of recruit. If a chief constable says he wouldn't trust some of his officers, or some of his officers shouldn't carry tasers, I suggest that they're not suitable to be a police officer. When you were talking about the recent case of the 92-year-old man with no legs being tasered, of course, I watched that. I find it very, very hard to understand why that was done. However, sometimes it's not the critic that counts. It's the person in the arena dealing with the incident. You don't know anything about the background. They were obviously called there because the staff was seriously concerned.
Well,
but anyway, that aside, I believe that all officers should be armed with a taser. I regularly, unfortunately, I can go to Spain now and again. I speak with some Spanish colleagues out there. They actually look at me in my pidgin English or Spanish. They communicate, tap on their heads and say, "You must be crazy to be a British police officer. You're so criticised. You're so, and you're not armed," and that they can't understand it. Out in Spain, if you're filming a Spanish police officer carrying out the execution of his duty, you can get arrested and you commit an offence. Over here now, the police have become more or less like the gladiators in the arena. You've got the baying crowd watching them, or with their phones out, winding them up.
But there may be reasons for that, because we've seen some shockers recently. We saw Wayne Couzens, we saw David Carrick.
But we can't judge an entire profession based on one bad egg or two bad eggs, in the way that we don't, we've got Lucy Letby. We don't then judge all other nurses and say, oh, well, maybe they're like her, or Harold Shipman, he was a bad doctor. Yeah. There are going to be, it's a human nature, there's going to be, bad participants.
Let's go to Paul in Merseyside. Paul, what do you think?
Well, I don't think that, the police should be encouraged to use tasers or any other sort of weapons. They should be encouraged and trained in the first instance to talk a situation down.
I think they probably are. I mean, they don't simply turn up and fire out of their car windows. They are supposed to engage first. But if the guy, in Claudia's story, he's carrying a machete, Paul, how much conversation does there need to be?
Well, no, you have to respond to each situation as it happens. If a guy is going around waving a machete, and of course you have to use force to restrain him.
So how's a 5'4" 24-year-old woman going to respond to a 6'2" crazed drunken man waving a machete around, threatening to kill her? Because she's in North Yorkshire, and the armed police in North Yorkshire, they could be up to an hour's drive away.
Go on, Paul.
So does she have to run away? Is that the only other option?
Yeah, obviously, in that situation, it needs force. But there are other situations where, they can be talked down.
I see. Yeah.
It's horses for courses.
OK, Paul, thanks so much. After the break, we're taking your calls on with now. More calls on police officers and tasers, because 5 News have been looking into this. 0207 862 2222. Do you think more police should carry tasers? Clint has been waiting in London. Hi, Clint.
Yeah, hello, sir.
Hi, Clint.
Hello, yeah. In my opinion, we had a killing, the murder of a young child at Haynham. And to say the truth, the police couldn't get near the man. He had a 3-foot samurai sword. And they had to wait for a Taser and officer to come in. And I do believe that the officer in themselves should have the choice of if they want to be trained or not.
Well, there's an interesting one. You've got a man, he'd killed the child, did you say? How terrible.
He killed a 15-year-old child.
Oh, I know. Yes, I saw. Of course, he was on the street and it was a random thing. Yes, I saw that story. That was about 6 months ago. So, yeah, and he's wandering around with a machete and he's violent and dangerous. And he wasn't shot in the end. He was convicted. I remember that. Michael, what would you do?
I mean,
You'd taser him.
I mean, that is a situation where it would be ideal for a police officer on the scene to have a taser.
I'm sure he was. Wasn't he tasered, Clint?
Sorry?
Wasn't he tasered
Yes,
in
he
the end?
was tasered. Yes, he was, yes.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, there we are. So you want more officers to have tasers or not?
I think that it's down to the police officer whether they choose to be trained. A police officer should be protected and be able to do their job safely.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Clint. David in Leeds, hi.
Not Leeds, Somerset.
What?
Somerset.
I'm so sorry. I don't know how Leeds and Somerset are opposites.
Yeah, exactly. But
I don't know how we did that. What would you like to say, David?
What I really want to say is, aren't we being insulting to our police officers, saying they got to be armed with this, they got to be armed with that? I have friends that are police officers. They don't need a taser to go and talk to Mrs. Jones about a shed being broken into. Now, if you got a guy on a machete guy on the street, send some officers with tasers. Just like if you got a guy with a gun, send a guy with the guns. But why are you insulting police officers by saying they need to be armed? They're a lot better than that.
David, they don't
can
know.
talk a guy down
Hang on,
from the
David.
building.
Not everyone's 6'2", David.
And also, David, they
You
don't
don't have to
know.
be
They don't actually know what they're
Hang on.
responding to. They don't know what they're responding to until they get there. So it can't be a case of, or do I take it today? Do I not? They need that backup there in case they're going to a man with a machete. It's not saying they have to draw it when they're talking to Mrs. Jones to make her feel threatened. It's if they got called to something, they have that backup. They have the option.
Go on, David.
No, I think you're being insulting to police officers. They're trained. They can talk a guy down from a building. You don't think... If someone says there's armed and dangerous on the street, we get it. But not in their... No, not in their everyday life.
So if I was a
In my
police officer and
everyday
I'm...
life,
Yeah.
I don't need a policeman with a taser, do I, in my everyday life?
You
We
might,
don't.
David.
But David, if I was a police officer, I'm a 5'2" woman, and I go and there's a 6'3" beefcake there who's threatening me with violence, what am I going to do against him?
Sliding
I
tackle.
get that, but you have been sent a report of someone who's using violence. Then have your taser, surely.
I see, David,
But
yeah.
not just randomly. Everyone's got a taser. Oh, I'll just taser you because you were insulting to Granny.
OK, no, I do see that maybe there are areas of Somerset where, the crime isn't going to be machete-based. It's going to be, as David says, breaking into a garden shed. And therefore, why bring a taser into a shed crime?
I think one thing
I do see David's point.
I think one thing you can be quite confident of is that if every cop had a taser, more people having mental health episodes would get tasered.
Ooh, that's taken a turn. You're right about that, and there's something very distressing about that.
There is, although bear in mind that the use of a taser is often to protect the police officer themselves, the person in question, so the person that's going to get tasered, or the public. So somebody might have to be incapacitated briefly for their own good.
For their own safety, yeah.
So it's a safe way of stopping somebody in their tracks.
OK, and also what we don't want to see is people with mental health conditions being shot with guns. So we got the tale of two Davids here. That was David in Somerset. We have also now discovered there is a David in Leeds. Hello, David in Leeds.
Morning to you. I just would like to be completely opposite to the previous David. I think tasers should be allowed completely. And in fact, I'd actually have most police carrying a gun because I think there's zero respect in everyday cities across this country for anybody that has any authority, whether you're in the NHS or anywhere. the riots happened in Southport and there was riots in Leeds. These crowds have no fear at all. I'm not saying people have to use anything, but if there's a deterrent, it will put off the majority of people causing trouble.
I wonder. I don't know. In the States,
on a daily basis.
I understand. In the States, the officers carry guns and they've got a big violent crime problem there. So, but maybe they carry it because of the crime. I don't know, Michael. What do you think? Let's take this wild. Why don't we all give every officer a firearm?
Well, in America, the cops have guns because the people have guns. And the great thing about Britain is the people don't have guns, so the cops don't really need guns except in exceptional situations. I think the idea that we sort of re-establish respect for the police by giving them guns and giving them more lethal authority. I mean, one reason why the police at the moment are lacking in respect is because of these, as you say, extreme cases, but real cases of people like Wayne Couzens, and a perception that too many police officers are power mad and power hungry. Now, I would suggest that if we shifted the police so it was more geared towards shooting guns than talking people down from situations, that would be the precise opposite thing we want to do, because we'd attract the more violent types as opposed to the more humanistic types, let's say.
Also, you have to bear in mind, if you make a mistake with a taser, then you might have a lawsuit on your hands. If you make a mistake with a gun, you'll kill somebody, you'll take somebody's life. So, with a firearm, there's no room for error. With a taser, if you have, like we saw in the video of the old guy being tasered in the old people's home, she obviously made a very big mistake when she chose to taser him. But that's not going to end his life.
Yeah, I sort of feel we should see some films of people being tasered who are crims, because it's remarkable. David, I know you want guns, but it is amazing. A violent person just falls flat on the floor as a result of the taser. Surely that's better than shooting them.
No, obviously, you're saying you're going to fire your arm. If you've got the gun, most people are not going to take the police officer on, female or male, because they're not deterrent. It's a complete strength of a reaction.
Yeah. Nine times out of 10, the threat of a taser will stop somebody in their tracks, because people don't want to be tasered.
They also...
Well, they wouldn't have tasered all the people in Southport, and they wouldn't have tasered all the people in Leeds that were causing a riot. If the police force turned up armed for a situation, that situation would have disappeared very quickly when they know there's a force on the ground that's not going to accept that type of behaviour.
We do have armed officers for extreme cases, so it's not like we don't have any guns in our police force.
I think the problem with this argument is if what you wanted to do is completely stop a riot in its tracks, turning up with guns wouldn't be enough, because that already happens. They'd have to use them. They'd have to start shooting people. Now, that probably would stop a riot in its tracks. It would create a lot of other problems down the line, so I'm not sure it's a great idea.
I've seen horrific videos from the States where someone rings the police to come because they say there's someone in the house, and the police come and they shoot the homeowner, and if they're out of control over there. David, thank you very much. It's made us think. Anyway, Kathy's in Lancashire. Hi, Kathy.
Good morning.
What do you think? More tasers for cops? But every cop has a taser.
No. There was a gentleman reported to the police several years ago, an elderly gentleman, because they thought he had a sword. He was walking with a sword. And the police came out and tasered him, and it was a walking stick, and he died.
Oh.
Yeah. So I am against tasers.
Well, that's a case where you've got a very bad police officer who can't tell the difference between a sword and a stick.
True. But what did police do before they got tasers, Jeremy?
Yeah, they used to chase people.
They probably had a lot more assaults on themselves. I think that's probably what happened. I think there was in 2023, that's the latest figures we have, there were 38,000 assaults on police officers. This is the people that they're here to protect and to serve. So I think if they didn't have tasers, there'd probably be a lot more. Those figures would be much higher.
Thank you, Kathy. Go on, Michael.
I think sometimes, obviously, there are some serious assaults on police officers, but it's often the case sort of after a protest when the police said 100 police officers were injured, and then someone does an FOI request, and it was like they stubbed their toes.
A wasp sting. I've seen that. Yes, I have seen it. Thank you, Kathy. Thanks for all your calls on this. You can watch the full report about tasers on 5 News later today at the earlier time of 4 o'clock. It's really worth watching.